just reading them, but being around them. The smell of old paper and ink is like perfume to me. That's why I work at the Book Nook, a small bookstore in our town. It's usually quiet, filled with the gentle rustle of pages and the occasional soft thank you from a customer. I like quiet. It's safe. But on weekends, sometimes Mrs. Gable, the owner of the bookstore, asks me to help out at her friend's coffee shop. The Cozy Corner is just down the street, and she says it's good for me to get out more. I'm not so sure. Coffee shops are louder, more people, more chances to be awkward, and I'm a professional at being awkward. This particular Saturday was bright and sunny, the kind of day that makes you want to be outside doing, well, something other than hiding behind a stack of novels. The Cozy Corner was busier than usual, filled with the chatter of conversations and the hiss of the espresso machine. I was behind the counter, trying to remember the difference between a latte and a cappuccino. They both looked like milky coffee to me. When he walked in, he was tall, with kind eyes and a smile that seemed to reach every corner of his face. His hair was a bit messy, like he'd just run his fingers through it, and he had a backpack slung over one shoulder. He looked new. I hadn't seen him around town before. "Hi," he said, his voice warm and friendly. "I'll take let's see, a black coffee, please." Simple. I could handle that. I turned to get the coffee, trying not to fumble with the cups. "Don't spill it, Anna. Don't spill it." I repeated this in my mind, a sort of anti-spilling mantra. Of course, that's exactly when it happened. As I turned back, my elbow knocked against a stack of napkins, sending them flying. In my attempt to catch them, I lurched forward, and the coffee went everywhere. Specifically, all over him. "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry," I blurted out, my face burning with embarrassment. I grabbed a handful of the now slightly less numerous napkins and started tapping at his shirt, which was now a lovely shade of coffee brown. He laughed, actually laughed, not an annoyed laugh, but a genuine, amused one. "It's okay," he said. "It happens. I'm probably more clumsy than you are." "I doubt that," I mumbled, still mortified. "I'm a walking disaster." He chuckled again. "I'm Mark," he said, extending a hand, the one that wasn't covered in coffee. "Anna," I replied, shaking his hand. My hand felt small and cold in his. We cleaned up the mess together, and I made him another coffee, this time without incident. He sat down at a small table near the window, and I found myself stealing glances at him while I served other customers. He was reading a book, a thick one, with a complicated-looking cover. I wondered what it was about. Later, when there was a lull in the coffee rush, I went over to his table to apologise again. "Really, it's fine," he said, smiling. "It gave us a chance to meet, right?" I smiled back, feeling a little flutter in my chest. "Right," I agreed. "So, are you new in town?" I asked, and felt proud of asking a question. "Yeah, just moved here last week," he said. I'm a website designer. I can work from anywhere, and I wanted a change of scenery. This town seemed peaceful. It is, I said. Mostly. I gestured vaguely at the coffee-stained napkins on the counter. He laughed. So, what do you do when you're not rescuing coffee? Cups. I work at the bookstore mostly, I said. The Book Nook, just down the street. I love bookstores, he said, his eyes lighting up. I'll have to check it out. Maybe you can recommend some good reads. Definitely, I said, feeling a surge of happiness. Maybe this wasn't so bad after all. Maybe coming to the coffee shop was a good idea. Then he said it. I also love hiking, he said, leaning back in his chair. There are some great trails around. Here I hear. And that's when I made the mistake. The small, seemingly insignificant mistake that would snowball into something much bigger. Oh, me too, I said, a little too enthusiastically. I love hiking. The words were out before I could stop them. It wasn't a huge lie. It was more of a stretching of the truth. A very, very big stretching. The truth was, I hadn't been on a mile hike in years. The closest I usually got to nature was looking at pictures of trees in books. I preferred the controlled environment of the bookstore, where the only wildlife was the occasional dust bunny. But he looked so happy, so excited about the prospect of sharing a hike with someone, that I couldn't take it back. I just smiled and nodded, hoping he wouldn't ask me any specific questions about my non-existent hiking experience. That's great, Mark exclaimed. He continued, maybe we could go sometime. There's a trail, I think it's called Eagle's Peak, that's supposed to have amazing views. Spoiler alert, I couldn't. Saturday morning arrived with the force of a looming deadline. I woke up feeling sick to my stomach. The hiking boots sat by the door, looking menacing. My backpack felt like it weighed a ton. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked ridiculous. I looked like a child playing dress-up. I looked like someone who was about to make a very big mistake. I considered calling Mark and cancelling. I could fake a sudden illness, a family emergency, a sudden allergy to fresh air, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. I was trapped by my own lie, and the only way out, it seemed, was to go through with it. Perhaps if I am lucky, the mountain will be closed. Perhaps there will be a sign. Perhaps Mark arrived right on time, looking ridiculously handsome in his hiking gear. He had a proper hiking backpack, hiking poles, and a confident smile that made my stomach do somersaults of both excitement and terror. I, on the other hand, felt like an imposter in my brand new boots and overstuffed backpack, ready for an adventure. He asked, his eyes sparkling. As I'll ever be, I replied, trying to sound enthusiastic. My voice came out a little squeaky. We drove to the base of Eagle's Peak in his car, a small, practical SUV that looked much more at home on a mountain road than my beat-up old sedan. The drive was filled with awkward small talk. I tried to steer the conversation away from anything hiking related, asking him about his website design work and his impressions of the town. He answered patiently, but I could sense a hint of curiosity. in his eyes, like he was waiting for me to share my vast, non-existent hiking knowledge. The trailhead was intimidating. A large wooden sign displayed a map of the trail with ominous warnings about steep inclines and challenging terrain. I gulped. This was really happening. We started up the trail, and for the first few minutes, it wasn't too bad. The path was relatively flat, winding through a forest of tall trees. I focused on putting one foot in front of the other, trying to remember the hiking tips I'd read online. Pace yourself, breathe deeply, don't look down. But soon, the trail started to climb and climb and climb. My breath became ragged, my legs started to ache, and my carefully constructed facade of experienced hiker began to crumble. Mark, meanwhile, seemed to be barely breaking a sweat. He walked with an easy grace, pointing out different types of trees and birds. He even tried to teach me a bird call, which I promptly butchered. So, he said, after we'd been hiking for about an hour, which felt like a week, "What's your favourite trail you've ever hiked?" I froze. This was the question I'd been dreading. My mind went blank. I couldn't remember the name of a single hiking trail, real or fictional. I stammered. There's this one with trees. Brilliant, Anna. Truly brilliant. Mark looked at me with a slightly puzzled expression. Trees, he repeated. Yes, I said, desperately trying to salvage the situation. Lots of trees. Very green. He chuckled, but I could tell he was starting to suspect something. I decided to change the subject quickly. Wow, look at that view, I exclaimed, pointing vaguely at a gap in the trees. It was a nice view, I had to admit. The valley stretched out below us, a patchwork of green fields and winding roads. But mostly, I was just relieved to have a distraction. We continued our ascent, the trail becoming increasingly steep and rocky. I struggled to keep up, my carefully packed backpack feeling heavier with every step. I tried to hide my discomfort, pretending to admire the scenery, but I'm pretty sure I was grimacing more than smiling. Then it happened. We were navigating a particularly tricky section of the trail, a narrow path with a steep drop-off on one side. I stepped on a loose rock, my ankle twisted beneath me, and I went down. Hard. A sharp pain shot through my ankle. I cried out, more from surprise than anything else. Mark was instantly at my side. "Anna, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. I think I twisted my ankle, I said, my voice trembling. I tried to stand up, but a wave of pain washed over me. I couldn't put any weight on it. My stomach did a little flip-flop. Eagle's Peak. That sounded high and possibly dangerous, but I was already in too deep. That sounds wonderful, I managed to say, trying to keep my voice steady. Sure, sometime. He grinned. How about next weekend? Next weekend. 7 days. 7 days to become a hiker. Or, more likely, 7 days to figure out how to get out of this mess. Perfect, I said, with a smile that felt a little too wide, a little too fake. Perfect. perfect, he finished. His coffee gave me another one of those dazzling smiles and said he'd see me soon. As he walked out the door, I leaned against the counter, feeling a mixture of excitement and dread. I had a date, sort of, with a really cute guy, sort of, based on a lie, definitely. I sighed. This was going to be interesting, and that's going to be a big problem. The moment Mark left, the reality of what I'd done hit me. I, Anna, lover of soft blankets and indoor plumbing, had agreed to go hiking. On Eagle's Peak, no less. A place that sounded suspiciously like it involved actual eagles. And peaks. My first thought, naturally, was to panic. My second thought was to call Sarah, my best friend. She's the practical one. The one who organises her sock drawer by colour and always has a plan. I, on the other hand, tend to organise my life by things I can reach without getting out of bed. I pulled out my phone and dialed her number, pacing behind the coffee counter. Hey Anna, what's up? Sarah answered, her voice bright and cheerful. I did something stupid, I said, my voice a mix of despair and disbelief. Define stupid, she said, a hint of amusement in her tone. Did you finally try to rearrange the bookstore's shelves by genre and alphabetize by author's middle name? Worse, I said. Much worse. I explained the whole coffee spilling, Mark meeting, hiking lie situation. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the line. Then Sarah burst out laughing. You! Hiking! She finally managed to say between giggles. Anna, you get winded. Walking up the stairs to your apartment. I know, I wailed. It just came out. He was so cute and he loves hiking and I just wanted him to like me. Okay, calm down, Sarah said, her laughter subsiding. The solution is simple. Just tell him the truth. Tell him you're not a hiker, that you got nervous and said something silly. But what if he doesn't like me anymore? I asked, my voice small. He seemed really excited about hiking together. Anna, Sarah said, her voice softening. If he's a decent guy, he'll understand. And if he doesn't, then he's not worth it. Honesty is always the best policy, you know, even in your romance. Novels, she had a point. All my favourite heroines were brave and honest, even when it was difficult. But they didn't have to face the prospect of climbing a mountain with a guy they barely knew. I'll think about it, I said, unconvinced. But in the meantime, I have a more pressing problem. I have to look like I know something about hiking. Right, Sarah said, her practical side kicking in. Operation Fake Hiker is a go. First you need boots, good ones. Don't even think about wearing those cute little flats you love. And so began my week of frantic preparation. I went to the outdoor store and, feeling completely out of my element, bought a pair of hiking boots that looked like they could survive a small avalanche. The sales assistant, a woman with muscles I didn't even know existed, gave me a pitying look when I asked if they came in a less intense colour. I spent hours online researching hiking trails, essential gear, and how to avoid bears. The internet is a terrifying place. It turns out there are a lot of ways to get injured, lost, or eaten in the wilderness. I practiced walking in the boots around my apartment, trying to get used to their weight and stiffness. I tripped over the rug at least 5 times. I packed a backpack with everything the internet told me I needed. Water, snacks, a first aid kit, a map, a compass, which I had no idea how to use, and a whistle in case of bears, or more likely, in case I got tired and wanted to be rescued. The guilt gnawed at me with every passing day. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped, thinking it was Mark, ready to talk about our hiking plans. I started having dreams about falling off cliffs and being chased by squirrels. Apparently, they can be quite aggressive. The internal conflict was the worst. One part of me, the logical, Sarah-influenced part, screamed at me to confess. The other part, the hopeful, Mark-infatuated part, whispered that maybe, just maybe, I could pull this off. Maybe I could fake it until I made it. Maybe I could become a hiker overnight. He knelt beside me, gently examining my ankle. It's already starting to swell, he said. We need to get you back down. And that's when it all came pouring out. The guilt, the fear, the sheer absurdity of the situation. It all overwhelmed me. Mark, I have to tell you something, I said, tears welling up in my eyes. I lied. I don't like hiking. I've barely ever hiked in my life. I wanted you to like me. I confessed everything. The coffee shop lie, the frantic research, the borrowed boots, the aggressive squirrels in my dreams. I told him how much I preferred books and quiet evenings, how I felt like a fraud, how terrified I had been of this hike. When I was finished, I looked at him, expecting to see disappointment, maybe even anger, but his expression was soft, understanding. I kind of figured, he said, a small smile playing on his lips. You did? I asked, surprised. Yeah, he said. You weren't exactly the most convincing hiker. And that bit about the trees. He chuckled. So, you're not mad? I asked, still feeling a little shaky. Mad, he said. No, Anna, I'm not mad. A little surprised maybe, but not mad. Actually, he paused, looking at me intently. I'm kind of relieved. Relieved, I repeated, confused. Yeah, he said. Because to be honest, I'm not a huge hiker either. I enjoy it occasionally, but it's not my whole life. I was actually kind of nervous about impressing you. I thought you were this amazing, outdoorsy person, and I was trying to keep up. I stared at him, speechless. He had been nervous about impressing me. The clumsy, book-loving, hiking imposter. I don't understand, I said. I like you, Anna, he said, his voice sincere. I liked you from the moment you spilled coffee all over me. And I like that you like books. I like books too. We could have just talked about books. He smiled, and this time it was my turn to feel a genuine smile spread across my face. The relief was immense. The weight of the lie, the backpack, even the throbbing in my ankle. It So, I say, my voice sounding almost normal. What now? Well, Mark replies, now we get you some ice for that ankle and avoid trails named after birds. Getting down the mountain was, predictably, an ordeal. Mark was incredibly patient and supportive, basically acting as my human crutch. He carefully helped me navigate the rocky path, taking slow, deliberate steps. We moved at a snail's pace, and I apologized at least 100 times. He just kept smiling and telling me it was okay. Think of it as a very slow, scenic descent, he said at one point, trying to lighten the mood. We're getting the extended hiking experience. I managed a weak laugh. Even with a throbbing ankle, I couldn't help but appreciate his kindness and his sense of humour. The whole situation was absurd, but somehow it was also nice. We were two people, connected by a ridiculous lie and a sprained ankle, slowly making our way down a mountain. As we walked, we talked, not about hiking, thankfully, but about everything else. I told him about my love for classic literature, my dreams of writing a novel someday, a romance of course, and my fear of spiders. He told me about his passion for web design, his family back in his hometown, and his surprisingly extensive knowledge of 80s music. We discovered that we had more in common than we initially thought. We both loved old movies, disliked crowded places, and had a shared weakness for chocolate chip cookies. The lie about hiking, which had seemed so enormous at first, now felt like a small silly blip in the bigger picture of getting to know each other. By the time we reached the bottom of the trail, my ankle was throbbing, but my heart felt lighter. Fear and guilt were gone, replaced by a sense of relief and a surprising feeling of closeness to Mark. He drove me back to my apartment, insisting on helping me inside. My apartment, unlike the pristine wilderness, was a cosy mess. Books were stacked on every surface. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the coffee table, and a fluffy blanket was draped over the back of the sofa. It was me, in all my unoutdoorsy glory. Wow, Mark said, looking around with a smile. This is exactly what I expected. I blushed, suddenly self-conscious about my bookish haven. It's a bit of a mess, I said. I like it, he said, his eyes meeting mine. It's real. He helped me settle on the sofa, propping my ankle up on a pile of pillows. He even went to the kitchen and made me a cup of tea, finding the tea bags and mugs without any help. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. I should probably get going, he said, after I'd finished my tea. You need to rest that ankle. Thank you, I said sincerely, for everything, for helping me down the mountain, for not being angry, for the tea. He smiled. You're welcome, Anna. And honestly, I'm glad you told me the truth. I would have figured it out eventually, and it would have been a lot more awkward. I learned my lesson, I said. Honesty is definitely the best policy, even if it means admitting you'd rather read a book about hiking than actually go hiking. He laughed. So, what now? He asked. No more Hiking dates, I presume. Definitely not, I said, with feeling. But maybe we could try something else. Something indoors, like a movie night. His eyes lit up. I'd like that very much, he said. How about tomorrow? We could order pizza, watch a classic movie, and discuss our favourite books. It's a date, I said, smiling. A real date this time, based on honesty and shared interests, not on a silly lie. He said goodbye, promising to text me later. As he closed the door behind him, I leaned back against the pillows, feeling a sense of contentment I hadn't expected. The whole hiking fiasco had been a disaster, but it had also been a valuable lesson. I had learned that pretending to be someone I wasn't was exhausting and ultimately pointless. I had learned that true connection comes from being genuine, from sharing your real self with another person, flaws and all, and most importantly, I had learned that even a clumsy, book-loving, hiking-averse person like me could find a connection with a kind, understanding, website-designing guy who liked 80s music and made a pretty good cup of tea.